and I call on Chris Philp to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Hollowbone. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I beg to move that this House has considered the persecution of Christians overseas. And given the amount of interest from colleagues, I will keep my remarks as short as possible in order for colleagues to have the maximum amount of time to speak in this debate. In April of last year, a young Nigerian woman, Dorkas Zakka, was murdered along with 12 others in Kafanchan state simply for attending an Easter Mass. Local priest Father Alexander Yeycock said that Nigerian military units stood by and did nothing while these murders took place. Last November, in Mina, in Egypt, a mob surrounded a Coptic church, threatening worshippers inside, many of whom were also physically attacked. Local Coptic leader Anba Macarius said that the Egyptian authorities have done nothing to bring those responsible to justice. Bibi was sentenced to death by hanging for blasphemy in Pakistan in 2010, a sentence that has thankfully been suspended since. And 2 Pakistani politicians who advocated on her behalf and opposed Pakistan's blasphemy laws were assassinated. In May of last year, 2 churches in Sudan were destroyed on the orders of the Sudanese government. In June of last year, 33 Christian women in Eritrea were imprisoned by the Eritrean government simply for taking part in prayer activity. Just 2 weeks ago, Mr Hollowbone, Pakistani man Sunil Salam was beaten to death by a group of doctors and security guards, a group of doctors, Mr Hollowbone, at the Services Hospital in Lahore, in Pakistan, when he protested at the anti-Christian abuse his heavily pregnant sister had suffered at the hospital. A man beaten to death by doctors in a hospital simply for being Christian. In January of this year, in Tamil Nadu in southern India, a mob pursued and beat a priest and 3 companions outside a police station. Despite their desperate pleas for help, the police stood by and did nothing. And we've heard nothing by way of condemnation of these sorts of attacks in India from Prime Minister Modi. According to a petition presented to Parliament last year by Action for Churches in Need, Action for the Church in Need, attacks like these have been taking place in around 50 countries worldwide. In India alone, around 24,000 Christians were physically assaulted last year. And in Iraq, the majority of the Christian and Yazidi populations have come close to being wiped out. Yes, I will.
I'm very interested in what he said about various countries, the persecuting Christians. I hope he'll come on in North Korea, for example,
yes.
China, who again have been persecuting Christians. And this has been on for a long time,
yes.
in actual fact. Particularly in relation to Egypt. The Coptic Church has been persecuted for years and years in Egypt. And I hope the Minister, when he winds up, will tell us for a change what the British government's going to do about it. Maybe we should look at aid.
Yeah, well, the Honourable Member for Coventry South preempts my speech in 2 or 3 regards, but since he mentions North Korea, Action for the Church in Need ranks North Korea as the worst country for Christians to live in. Accurate information is, of course, hard to obtain, but ACN estimates that at least 200,000 Christians have gone missing in North Korea since 1973. And North Koreans who are found practicing as Christians face arrest, torture and imprisonment, and there are worrying examples of Christians being publicly executed in North Korea. Yes, I will.
Could I take my friend back from North Korea to Iraq and the Middle East? May I make a general point? There are so many people here who want to speak. Can I congratulate my honourable friend on securing this really important debate, and perhaps suggest that he sponsors a longer debate in future, and all of us will have a chance to speak. But may I invite him to praise the work of Open Doors, who's been working with the Christian communities in Iraq and in Syria?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman. Perhaps we should get together, actually all of us, and ask for a backbench business debate one Thursday when we can debate this matter more fully. So let's, as an action, take that away, all of us, to the backbench business committee. I'll note down who's here so I can get in touch afterwards. But I would specifically like to praise Open Doors. I did actually write it on the top of my notes, but in my haste to get started and not take up too much time, I overlooked to do so. And in fact, I can see sitting here Reverend Sue Thomas over there from St John's Church in Old Coulsdon in my constituency, who I've been discussing this issue with for some time, who works with Open Doors, and I'd like to thank Open Doors for their work in this area, and specifically thank Reverend Sue Thomas. Yes.
For having secured this debate, and also with regards to the Open Doors charity, they have found that overall persecution of Christians has risen for the 5th year in a row. And I think such persecution, indeed of any religious group, is abhorrent and unacceptable. Would my honourable friend agree with me that the UK must put the protection of human rights, including the freedom of religion and belief, at the heart of its foreign policy, and use all diplomatic means available to ensure adherence to international law?
Well, I agree very strongly with the sentiments that the Honourable Member has just expressed. I'll come on in a moment to say what I feel the UK Government could do in this area, or could do more of. But whatever efforts are being made at the moment, I'm afraid to say worldwide, they are not enough, because as the Honourable Member has just pointed out, the problem of Christians being persecuted is getting worse, not better. The direction of travel is in the wrong direction, and I think it is incumbent upon those of us in the United Kingdom and in countries that have influence, or can have influence, to do a lot more than we are doing at the moment. We need to reverse the declining trend. There are many examples where the trend is getting worse. We all know about the activities of Boko Haram in Nigeria, where 276 Christian schoolgirls were kidnapped a couple of years ago, 112 of whom are still missing. And, of course, in Myanmar, where Rohingya Muslims have been persecuted, Christian converts have been persecuted as well. And there are around about 100 Christians living in displacement camps as a result. Now, Mr Hollowbone... Yes, I will.
He just mentioned the Chibok girls, and I'm very grateful to him for securing this debate. And actually, there was a bid to the Backbench Business Committee for a wider debate, which was unfortunately rejected. But we should try again.
Yes.
You mentioned Chibok girls. Through him, could I just remind colleagues that there is an EDM 1246 about the particular plight of one of these girls who had to spend her 15th birthday still in captivity because she's refusing to renounce her faith. If all colleagues through him would be willing to sign that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I think my honourable friend is raising a very important issue and drawing attention to a very important EDM. So many Christians who are faced with this sort of persecution do show tremendous faith and tremendous bravery by standing up for their faith in the face of the most appalling threats. It is a truly inspiring example, and I think tells us how seriously we must take our duties to protect girls like the one my honourable friend refers to, who deserve all of the support and protection we can possibly give them. Now, Mr Hollowbone, I've deliberately chosen the examples that I mentioned earlier, because in all of those examples, a government, a nation-state's government, failed to take action to protect Christians being persecuted, whether it was those army units in Nigeria standing by and doing nothing, the police in Egypt and in India standing by and doing nothing, or in that other example in Sudan, it was the government themselves who were imprisoning Christians. I think the gentleman has stood up first.
For giving way and congratulate him again on securing the debate. Would he agree with me that when he's itemising the huge displacement that has been in the Middle East alone, we are talking about unprecedented movements of Christians out of their historic homelands, and we really need to address that problem?
Yes, indeed. The honourable gentleman is quite right. I've been raising individual cases because those individual cases tell a very painful and very powerful story. But behind those individual cases lie hundreds of thousands, probably more like millions, of Christians being persecuted and displaced, particularly in the Middle East. And we cannot stand by. We cannot walk by on the other side. We must take action.
Very good debate. Could I congratulate the honourable gentleman, but just remind him, when I was the Parliamentary Church Warden of St Margaret's, we did some very good work trying to engage the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association with trying to get an interface with some of these countries where we're not getting could we sort of be optimistic and get something moving back in that kind of track?
Well, I very much hope we can, and the honourable gentleman is driving at the point I was just beginning to make, which is that, you know, we understand that there are terrorist organisations who do terrible things like ISIS, and we're quite rightly combating those. But I chose the examples I did very specifically because in those examples, governments of nation-states, some of them Commonwealth members, some of them allies of the United Kingdom, have either stood by and done nothing, or in some cases have actively encouraged and facilitated the persecution that I've been describing. It is unacceptable, in my view, that allies of the United Kingdom should stand by and allow this kind of persecution to take place. And as a powerful Western nation, we have levers at our disposal to influence these countries who are allowing the persecution of Christians to take place under their nose and knowingly, deliberately, intentionally doing nothing. And the most obvious lever we have was referred to by an honourable gentleman a few moments ago, and that is the overseas aid budget. It's a very good thing that we spend £13 billion a year on overseas aid, 0.7% of GDP. But that gives us, I think, enormous influence. Much of that aid is spent bilaterally. It goes directly to countries rather than via third-party agencies like the United Nations or even the European Union. And I believe we should use the power which that aid donation confers to achieve the change we want to see. So, for example, the largest bilateral recipient of overseas aid is Pakistan. It's about £350 million a year. And yet, Christians there are persecuted terribly with violent acts, and indeed the government themselves or the court system in Pakistan often prosecutes Christians using blasphemy laws that are, frankly, wholly contrary to any notion of free speech or religious freedom. So I believe we should be looking at imposing some conditionality that says, particularly on aid that we give directly to a government, another government, that if we're going to give aid directly to another government, then we should be asking in return that they do more, not just pay lip service and sort of say fine words, which of course they generally speaking do, but actually take real action to prevent the persecution of Christians, whether it's through the court systems of these countries or whether it's through police forces or armed forces standing by and doing nothing. Yes.
I'm most grateful to him. And would he agree with me that actually, on the more positive side, we need to expect the Department for International Development to take far more account of the work which faith-based Christian and other faith-based organisations do. Yeah. I'm afraid that they don't take enough account of the strength of the work that they do in development on behalf of the people of that country. I would say that my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, the Minister here, has actually an exception to that in his role in the Foreign Office. But this needs to spread to DFID. Yep. DFID cannot be a religion-free zone. No.
Well, I think the honourable gentleman is quite right. And Christian charities and Christian organisations often show enormous courage in going into areas where governments, the UN, fear to tread and do work protecting Christians who are not being protected by anybody else. So I do endorse the point the honourable gentleman makes, and I'm sure the Minister, I hope the Minister will specifically reply to that point at the end of the debate. So I think I'm clear about the fact we should be using the overseas aid budget as a means to influence behaviour by sovereign governments. We in this country, quite rightly, offer full religious freedom, regardless of faith, to everybody. And it's quite right that we do that. I'm proud this country offers complete religious freedom. But I think, in return, we should be expecting, in fact, we should be demanding that Christians around the world, indeed any faith around the world, any faith, receives precisely the same religious freedom, and where that religious freedom is not extended by unenlightened governments, we should be doing everything to change that. You know, in this country, we allow some countries, for example in the Middle East, to send quite large amounts of money into this country to promote their domestic faith, which is fine, we're happy to let that happen, but at the same time, those very same governments sending money here are denying religious freedom over there. That is fundamentally unfair, and it should end. Mr Holloway, I'm conscious that time is pressing on, so I want to just conclude by saying that there are two reasons why I believe this should be at the top of our foreign policy and overseas aid agenda, and why we need more than simply warm words from some of these overseas governments. There is clearly a human rights dimension. Religious freedom is a fundamental human right. There is a human tragedy in that individual Christians are being persecuted in the most appalling ways that I described in those examples at the beginning. But I also believe that it serves our national interest to see human rights promoted, because if we help these countries become more tolerant, if we help human rights take root, that will in itself combat extremism, because where you have tolerance, where you have respect, then extremism will not flourish. So I believe there is an overwhelming human rights case for pushing this agenda, pushing it hard and pushing it properly, and I believe there's a national interest argument as well. Mr Holloman, I'm very grateful for your chairmanship this afternoon. I know lots of members want to speak, so I will conclude now by saying it's an important issue. It's one we all feel strongly about, and I very much look forward to the Minister's response in due course. Thank you.